close that properly.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Lights, Camera, Podcast?
Yeah.
Nice. Let me sync it again. No. Hello and welcome back to Lights, Camera, Podcast, the podcast where we talk about different movies. Today we are going to be talking about 2001 A Space Odyssey. Let's begin.
Yeah, let's begin. So, firstly, I'll ask you this time. What were your initial thoughts going into watching the movie in the first place? Because obviously you've seen The Shining before. Have you seen A Clockwork Orange?
I have, yeah.
You have. So, this was a movie both of us hadn't actually watched before. So, yeah, what were your thoughts going in watching it?
So it's a movie I've wanted to see for a while. I've kind of put it off because it's quite a heavy movie. I've known that it is quite a big movie to take in. There's a lot in there. And it is seen as such an iconic film.
Yeah, definitely.
So I did want to watch it quite, properly. Basically, it's not something you can just turn on and just have on in the background. You do have to pay attention when you're watching it.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's quite a long film as well. And because of that, I was putting it off. But when I did obviously come around to seeing it, I am glad I made the effort.
Oh, good.
So the initial thoughts are definitely positive.
Oh, good. And in terms of in general, how would you compare it to, if you were to kind of give a general summary of how did it compare to other movies that you've watched by Stanley Kubrick?
So let's just clarify, this is a film by, I guess you could call him a legendary director, Stanley Kubrick. He's made films like The Shining. He's also done A Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket. I think it definitely fits in that same kind of that same realm of film in terms of it's another the abstract. It fits in with his filmography as obviously like a classic. We were saying before, it's all of his films can be described as iconic, and this is definitely in that ballpark.
Yeah. So what would be your main initial things from the movie? What would be the main points you'd want to make about the movie?
I would say
experience of watching it, themes that you're interested in.
It's definitely a movie that probably requires more than one watch to pick up everything or to fully understand it. It's an extremely finely crafted movie. I would say is how I would describe it. Everything's very intentional. It's kind of very calculated. It's quite cold in that way, and I think that's intentional as well. So the things that the things I enjoyed the most out of it would probably definitely the visuals.
Yeah.
The visuals, I think, for a movie that was made in the 70s, this could have been made yesterday and you wouldn't have questioned it. Like the way the effects, the miniatures. Do you know what miniatures are? Yeah,
because they make the miniature objects, don't they?
Yeah.
And then they use. I don't even know what they'd use if the green screens were around back then or not.
No, I don't think so.
Like the spaceships and all that type of thing.
So there've been a lot of miniatures and matte paintings for the background. But the miniatures are so detailed, like even small things like you can see on the space shuttle, there's lights turning off on certain points of it, and to have that on such it's because it's actually just like a small object. Obviously, they didn't film it in space. In real life, it's an extreme attention to detail that probably took hours of work for a tiny payoff.
Definitely.
So I think the visuals is definitely a big thing for me, and also the I guess the themes as well, like what it's maybe not necessarily trying to say, but what it's about, the human condition, and about it touches on things like AI and technology, which we'll get into more detail about. What about you?
I would agree with that. I think it came at a very timely point, this movie, in between, actually came long before the big leap forward, you could say, in technology, which I would say would be in the 90s and early 2000s, where there's a really big advancement. But it came at a point where also there were a lot of still advancements were being made, especially in space, and it still was something that was quite abstract to many people. I think it definitely... It showed people who nowadays, what we take for granted, our view of space, our understanding of space, very abstract ideas which nowadays are commonplace. Most people, children even, know about these types of things. But actually, I think for that audience at that time with those visuals, it really showed to them what space was like. It also and touched upon other things like AI, as you mentioned, technology, and the relationship between mankind and technology as well.
There's a lot of things in that film that are actual pieces of technology we use now.
Yeah.
Like there's essentially a FaceTime
Yeah.
in the movie when he's talking to when one of the characters is talking to his child.
Yeah.
And there's tablets.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's like an iPad, and obviously AI, which is a huge thing now.
Yeah, definitely.
And this kind of revolutionized our ideas of what AI is.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that a lot of movies have been based off this idea of he made in this movie. I don't know many other movies in which, other than you could say gothic horror movies, which you could perhaps link in some way of this idea of creating something that's then evil, basically. Yeah. But in this way, you know, things like I, Robot and all these other movies which come out in the 2000s, it's a theme which has now become quite regular.
Yeah.
But actually, there was something really... Now we have robots and all this type of thing, but what I really liked about this is it did it in actually, I think, fairly simple way, you know, which we'll get on in a bit more anyway, but how it didn't require really fancy things like a big robot or... Exactly, do you see what I mean? It was actually just a computer... it was a thing integrated into a computer.
Absolutely, yeah. Like it wasn't this like killing machine robot. It was literally just a voice.
Exactly.
And the way they portrayed it makes it seem even more menacing.
Yeah.
Like it's just all it is this red light.
Yeah.
On a panel.
Yeah.
But somehow
talking so calmly.
Yeah. But it's talking calmly, but there's also points where you can hear it's sarcastic or it's getting cocky, so it has a personality of its own.
Exactly.
So the character we're obviously talking about is Hal.
Yeah.
Hal 3000, which is the onboard.
I think it's Hal 9000.
Hal 9000. My mistake. Which is the onboard computer that like kind of controls the system, but it is a form of artificial intelligence, so it has a mind of its own, and it knows what the team, Dave and Frank, what their mission is. And its aim, you would think, is to help them, but obviously things go awry in the movie.
Definitely.
Should we kind of talk about quickly what the plot of this movie is, if you can even explain it? So let's start from the beginning.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to start?
So the first thing we're introduced to is, it says the dawn of man, which is, and we just see basically like primates doing what primates do, and just kind of going crazy. And there is a story there actually, because we see two groups, and there's like a watering hole, and they're fighting over the water hole.
Exactly.
And we see I think it's the group that loses comes into contact with the monolith.
Yes.
Yeah. And at first they're scared of it, but then obviously there's something about it that
they like.
Yeah. And there's always that I guess you'd call it a track that plays whenever the monolith comes. It's one of the most eerie sounds in any film.
Yeah.
Just that human like humming noise.
Yeah. Like the operatic type voice, which is used a lot in this movie actually.
Yeah. Whenever the monolith is there, it seems to be played.
Yeah.
And then they learn how to use tools from that, it seems.
Exactly, yeah. That's what I was going to say, that these apes, after being exposed to it, one of them is obviously playing with some bones on the floor. And there's flashbacks actually to the monolith in that point, and he gets aggressive and starts smashing the bones up and uses that then to kill one of the other apes from the watering hole. And I think that's quite an important bit in the movie as well. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's at first you don't quite know what's going on, but
because it goes on for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's about the first 20 minutes of the movie. Yeah. It's just with these apes. But we were introduced to what I would consider the protagonist of the movie.
Yeah.
What do you think? Who do you think is the protagonist? Do you think it's the monolith, or do you think it's Hal? Because it could be either, in my opinion.
I would say the protagonist is probably the monolith, because the monolith is constant.
Sorry, antagonist.
Oh, the antagonist. Yeah. The antagonist I would say probably Hal. Okay. But I don't know, because he's only there actually for not that long in the whole movie. Yeah. His presence is actually only in one scene of the movie, which is I think the third part of the movie, when the Jupiter mission, because he's not there on the moon mission. What do you think?
I think the antagonist is the monolith.
Oh, the antagonist.
So, yeah. So antagonist meaning against the protagonist. Yeah. I think the protagonist is probably Dave. Dave is the main character.
Dave, yeah.
because it's the antagonist is well, the monolith is who he comes across at the end.
Yeah,
Is what we see at the end of the movie,
Yeah.
basically staring down
yeah,
at Dave. It could be either, but yeah, the monolith is essentially the first character we're introduced to,
yeah,
and it's the last character that we see. So it's there throughout the movie.
yeah. But do you think that the monolith is a bad force then? Because I was thinking maybe it's not so much a bad
Really?
force. Yeah. In that, but we can discuss that a bit more because it's a bit. Should we continue along the story?
So we're after the primates. Literally, the next scene is we see a spaceship.
Yeah.
Like this huge advancement in technology. We go from
Yeah.
apes to like space travel.
Yeah, because he throws up the bone, and as the bone comes down, it becomes a spaceship.
Yeah.
Which is millions of years then in the future.
Exactly. Yeah. And we introduced to our next character.
Floyd Hayward, I think his name is.
Floyd Hayward, that's the one, yeah. Who's going on a mission to the moon.
Oh, Hayward Floyd, sorry.
Yeah, because he says his name,
Yeah.
last name first in the movie, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's on a mission to the moon for what we don't know at that point, some unknown mission. But he has a conversation with some other scientists, and it reveals that this is something strange is happening on the moon at the time. And then it's later revealed when he gets there that there's a monolith on the moon.
Yeah, and it was a cover story the whole time.
Yeah, as to why he was going. And they say that the monolith had been buried, not that like over time it's been weathered over, but it's something has physically buried it into the moon.
Yes.
What do you think about that? Like, because they don't explore it fully, they mention it and they leave it at that.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I thought that was a point where it implied that these monoliths have some relation to aliens, basically, or extraterrestrial life forms, because humans definitely wouldn't have buried it, I think. And so the only explanation would be, and I think that's the first implication to the audience, especially thinking of the audience at the time, that this has been put there by other life forms, basically.
I also thought the monoliths are the alien.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That they are the intelligent
They are
life.
the intelligent.
Because there's a point where, when they're about to take a picture with the monolith, and the monolith sends out a signal that causes them all to go crazy. So it's aware of what's around it, in my opinion. From that. So I don't know. Do you think the monolith that was on the moon is the same one that was on Earth, or do you think they're different?
I think there were different ones. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think they're different ones. What happened to the one on the Earth? Then we obviously don't know.
Yeah.
We're not told. And then after that, we're then put onto the Jupiter mission.
Yeah.
And we're introduced to firstly Dave, and then later on Frank, and also Hal.
Yeah.
And the things that happen on the mission.
Yeah. So they're going on the mission to Jupiter because the monolith on the moon sent out a signal that seemed to go to Jupiter.
Yeah.
So they sent them off, and there's 3 other scientists who are in, like, you could call it kind of cryopreservation, but without the cryo part. It was kind of some sort of life support machine where they're unconscious. And so it's basically just the 2 of them and Hal on the ship.
Yeah.
And that's when things again start to go a bit wrong.
And from the offset, you can tell that there's something not quite right with the relationship between the 3. Like the 2, Dave and Frank don't trust Hal.
Yeah.
And then they try to make an effort to communicate without him knowing what they're saying. They go into one of the pods, make sure that they can't hear him, but they don't take into account that Hal can see, and therefore is able to lip read what they're saying about him.
Exactly. Yeah.
So at that point, after that, Hal obviously kills Frank and shoots him out of his pod.
Yeah.
Do you think he did that out of, because he says he does it because he doesn't trust that they're going to go through with the mission, but do you think he does it out of spite? What do you think was his motivation? You
know how, like, in the beginning, the primate was using a tool, basically, to complete something, i.e. kill the person, and Hal, in essence, and then they become a spaceship. The bone became a spaceship. That's like a tool, you could say, for mankind. And in another way, Hal was like another version. It was like a tool, you could say, for mankind to assist mankind. But in a way, what happened is that this tool became so intelligent that the roles got reversed. And actually now Hal was using the humans to complete the mission. because it seemed like he actually the mission was something that he actually was more important to him than the crew or anything else.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in some ways, yeah, I think that was a signal of the roles getting reversed, and maybe I don't know. Maybe it was out of like self-preservation, partly. You know, he didn't want to get disconnected.
That's what I think. I think that more so that because when they spoke, they were like, okay, let's disconnect him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's doing it. But even if they were, their intention was to do that for the sake of the mission, Hal was still going to stop them. He doesn't really care as much. He cares more about self-preservation than about the mission.
Yeah.
Just in the same way as the humans.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. There's another thing that kind of repeats with both Floyd and with Dave, where they receive messages or they're giving messages about like saying happy birthday to their relatives.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because he gets it. Frank.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dave receives it from his parents.
Yeah.
And Floyd is saying it to his daughter.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like a significance about that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
Because, like I said at the start, there's a reason why each thing was put into the movie, in my opinion. That wasn't just random.
I feel like a lot of some of those scenes and stuff like that, especially some of the camera work, was really made to feel really isolated. And I think like it's similar to sometimes how The Shining was made. A lot of the camera, you know, like you see him running around, for example, the Thing for quite a long time, and you see a lot of empty scenes of the ship, the quietness. And really, in the whole movie, there isn't a huge amount of talking. No, there's actually very little talking, and I think that was done for a reason, to really show the isolation, really make it feel how there's only two people in and out of space with this computer. And I think that really built the tension, and them sending those messages were part of that to make them feel isolated. But maybe it was also another.
That's better than what I had in mind.
Well, you know,
so I was going to say it can kind of play into the fact that with these humans, they're still receiving messages from Earth, and it's an indication of like empathy and like understanding. Whereas Hal completely lacks that side of humanity.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. Right? Yeah.
So I thought like
contrast.
He's as close to humans as a robot can get, but he still lacks that aspect of humanity.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a key part of humanity.
Because both those messages are very heartfelt. You can see like the acting's really good in them. What did you think of, I suppose, moving forward a little bit, which was for me the strangest part of the movie. That's where kind of for me got really confused when he gets to Jupiter and then he goes through the wormhole or whatever. And that bit went on for ages as well.
And it plays into what you said. Like we have the landing sequence on the moon takes so long. And it's just like these long shots of the ship, and obviously there's like the operatic music playing in the background. And that part. So the ending was basically what we're talking about. So obviously he comes into contact with the monolith, and he goes through this wormhole, and he ends up in a room, which is like this really well arranged room, and he's aged significantly. So I think that is him being abducted by the monoliths. I think that's what that is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you see himself each time. Which is, I think, since he's almost in another dimension, it seems. Where time and like things have changed, so he's able to see into the future slightly, maybe, and see himself.
Yeah, I agree. I think he basically stayed there forever then. And that was a way of showing, firstly, the weirdness in the dimension, and also him aging. There forever.
But he landed there aged as well. Going through the wormhole aged him significantly, and then we see him in his bed dying, basically. And then he becomes a baby.
That was I really wasn't expecting that. And then you just see the baby looking at Earth.
I have no idea.
Yeah, that was very confusing for me. I think that ending bit was the most sci-fi part of the movie. It was very, very sci-fi, like very abstract. And it's something like you think you'd see out of like Star Trek or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's more of a symbolic thing than a literal thing, maybe. So I think it's supposed to indicate this like rebirth in a way of mankind, maybe. Like this next chapter. Potentially. I haven't got anything beyond that, honestly. But let's take a step back a bit. Let's talk a bit more about Hal as a character, because you touched on the fact that You know, he has this very calm manner of speaking, but he also does show some emotion, and he does become a character, like a full-fledged character in a way, simply through just his voice.
Yeah.
And at the end as well, you see him try and plea and bargain with Dave when he knows that he's coming to an end.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I didn't expect that, the way the character's set up, how I've seen previously.
Yeah, yeah. Especially how he locked him out of the ship and all this type of thing, and then when he realised, he was like, "Yeah, please, I'm scared." I think he said, "I'm scared" as well, or so things like that. And again, I think that's something which there had been a previous discussion on whether they have emotion, because this was a discussion I think that was had between them and someone back on Earth. When remember there was an interview, and they actually asked, "Oh, does he have emotions and stuff like that?"
They said, we don't know.
We don't know. And again, the question is, is he so intelligent that he knows to use that, or does he actually feel that?
Yeah, exactly. Which you never really know.
Yeah.
And after he kills Hal, we see a message saying that the humans on Earth had basically told Hal about the monolith, but they'd never told the humans. Which is almost like they're trusting the machines more than man.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy.
And from that, then you could even say that this situation partly arose in that, you know, Hal knew the mission, and it was very important for him to get it done because of him being a machine. And he actually may have, because he must have known basically that, you know, the people didn't know, and in that way he was the driving force. He was the one responsible for the mission, rather than the humans who were there basically to do the jobs he couldn't do.
Yeah, absolutely, because he's just, you know, can't physically do the things that he's able to.
Why do you think he killed all the other crew members as well on the ship? Because he turned off their life support?
Yeah. Probably for the same reasons that he tried to kill, that he killed Frank and tried to kill Dave. That he knows the humans don't trust him. And that they're going to try to do the same thing, essentially. So it's like a step ahead. It's like, I'm going to kill you before you can kill me, basically. I just thought,
go ahead.
I was going to say how we see the monkeys use this tool to kill other monkeys. In the same way the humans ended up killing other humans using Hal. So it's like the tool has been used to harm themselves.
Exactly.
Crazy. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to say something similar about how, you know, what do you think that tool, Hal, is one who ends up actually, the tool itself, you could say, ends up kind of killing the humans of its own accord. I think it was definitely very interesting analysis of, you know, of AI and technology in that sense. What did you think of, you know, the music and, you know, the lack of talking in the movie, all those long scenes as well? Was that something that bored you, or?
Not on this viewing, but I think one of my only issue with this movie was its pacing slightly. And I understand it's intentional, you know, this slow pacing, as you said, to make it reinforce this idea of isolation. And this, you know, this loneliness. But I think on repeat viewings it would be an issue for me in terms of, like, because I know what's coming next. It's just about getting to that next scene. So I would say it was probably an issue in that regard. I wasn't a huge fan of that aspect of it.
The slowness.
But it does definitely get that point across.
So like with The Shining, for example, whereby the time gaps get smaller between each thing, so, you know, each scene is like a shorter time basically, and so the pace of the movie picks up. This didn't really happen in this movie. There were in 2001, each one had actually a fairly similar pace. They were all quite slow paced. And I feel that, again, for me personally, one of my main criticism would be, and I think perhaps it's me from looking from today, like more modern perspective, that I would have liked to have a lot more of the story of Hal and the crew. So have a bit more of that, because I think that was really interesting part of the story, and I felt like it ended too quickly.
It did jump very quickly from having a regular relationship with Hal to immediately not trusting him, it seemed. That came quite suddenly.
It came suddenly.
And Frank was a character that came as soon as he we were introduced to, that went as soon as we were introduced to him.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, you're introduced to a character, Dr. Hayward. He's one of the first characters you're introduced to, and then he's gone for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
So it does feel a bit strange. But again, I feel like that's part of this idea of this long-term type of thing. There's no, it's all building up to David essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he would be the protagonist.
Yeah.
Because I was aware of the scenes that happen.
Yeah.
With Hal. I thought that was going to be him in the movie.
Yeah. I thought it was going
But
to
then
be him.
and we never see what happens on the moon.
Yeah.
Like completely.
Afterwards. Yeah.
We just see that they, the monolith messes with them.
Yeah.
And then we're on this mission to Jupiter.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spaces in between which you have to kind of fill in yourself. What did you think of the fact that they showed firsthand when they repair the aerial? They show it a really long firsthand and all done normally. They show basically the whole thing, and then they show it again a second time.
What do you mean?
So when they replace the aerial.
When all you can hear is him breathing.
Yeah. So they do it one time when nothing goes wrong, and then he does it again, and obviously the cord gets cut.
Yeah.
So what do you think the point was that? Why was that?
Why did they show it twice? Because I think didn't they go out the first time and found that there was actually nothing wrong with it?
Yeah.
And then they let it fail, and they were going to go out and see what was the cause of the failure.
Yeah. So, but why do you think he made it so long, that bit, in the sense that so that scene where he first came out the first time, and it was you saw like the pod. It was almost like completely continuous recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, why do you think they did it like that? I guess for the same reason, to show this lifestyle of just things being just so dragged out and things being so like there's no moving forward almost. It's just you're in this continuous state.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, maybe. But what do you think?
I thought, partly that, and I also thought that it's just maybe like another tool which is used to build up that tension the second time he went, because it's quite dangerous, you could say.
Yeah.
And actually, then on the second time, when the thing starts turning around by itself, the pod.
Yeah.
That bit, I was like, it really builds the tension, and then you just see the light turn on, and the hands come up, and the next thing you see is Frank like flying across, and it's really sinister actually. I remember.
Let's zoom in on how.
Yeah, and it did feel very sinister, and obviously also the lack of sound outside.
Yeah.
Other than the breathing.
Even after that, there was literally no sound up until when Dave comes back into the ship, when he's like blasted back into the ship.
Yeah.
Which is like nothing for like a solid few minutes.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. Like in another film, you'd hear like alarms going off and like the characters panicking and like this maybe loud intense music.
Yeah.
Here you just got no sound.
Exactly.
And it's so tense still.
So again, I think that was really a big focus of this movie was getting people to kind of experience more realistic way about what it's like, give people a view to space, being in space.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Any other points?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
It's a very hard movie to analyse.
It is.
Much harder than I expected it to be.
There was, because it's something you have to sit with, I think, and it's what you take away from it, I guess. And like I said, it's not something you can just do on a first viewing of it.
Yeah.
There'll be things you go back and notice that you didn't notice the first time.
Exactly.
Because there isn't a lot to pick up on the dialogue. There's probably a few pages of dialogue in the whole film.
Yeah, so it's all just interpretation.
Yeah. So what would you say are the things you enjoyed the most about the movie?
I enjoyed the music.
Yeah.
The use of music. I thought that the use of the classical music really, especially like when you first see the space station, and you have the music of orbiting and all this type of thing. I thought that was really splendidly done. It really gives a feel of like the grandeur, especially after seeing the primates.
Yeah.
They spent a long time on that, showing these space stations. I thought that was really nice. Another thing I liked was, as he was going through the wormhole, the flashes off showing his face.
Yeah.
And it's all quite contorted and stuff like that. And it looks quite scary.
It was, yeah. borders on a horror film at times
Yeah.
with Hal and with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's an iconic sci-fi film, but still.
Yeah, I agree. It felt like it definitely had elements of horror in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are two other points which I quite enjoyed, and obviously my favourite bit was definitely that kind of, for example, when Hal had the conversation with David about like having doubts about the mission and all that type of thing. That's kind of sparked it off, and you could tell like something might be going on here.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I think for me, I mentioned the visuals, not just in terms of how technically well done they were, but the choices in terms of the aesthetics.
Yeah.
Like the way everything actually looked, like the design. It was very simplistic, which is more of a modern. I think it's part of what makes it hold up.
Yeah.
Like there's not this old-fashioned technology or this view of the future that's really not too far from what we actually end up with.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes it even more scary. It makes it seem more realistic.
Yeah, definitely.
And also the technical elements, like when I don't know how they managed to do the zero gravity stuff.
Yeah.
And the walking on the walls and stuff like that. How they achieved that in like the 70s is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah. That's all I really have to say about it.
Yeah, I think the same with me.
Right. Do you want to sign us off?
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much for watching this episode of Lights Camera Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, leave suggestions of other movies you might want us to watch and analyse. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks.